Well, okay, welcome. Why don't we start with updates? I don't know, Hussein, do you want to give an update first or?
Yeah, I planned out the app. I ran into some technical difficulties with okay, excuse me, let me just explain what I'm talking about.
All right.
So, I wanted to do a complete little project under Bradley on creating a Vision OS Pro app that could benefit scientists and researchers, and came up with an idea to create some sort of interface or application that could let scientists visualize their data using spatial computing. This would ideally be for the new app OS, new app headset. It's the Apple Vision OS Pro headset, and so I have a plan in place, and I have some ideas written out in a few documents here and there. But I had some issues with installation with some technical issues, and had to recently go out and buy a new hard drive too, an external hard drive. Um, you know, a Vision OS Pro hard drive. So basically I'm trying to create something that scientists can use with the Vision OS Pro headset to let them do something applicable and practical with their research. So yeah.
That's good, yeah. And how is the development going on their API, or what do they provide without providing an actual headset? They give an environment for people to work with.
There's a Swift UE kit. Let me just Google it really quickly. So that's the thing. There are a few development kits and things like that for Swift. For the Vision OS Pro headset. You have to use Swift to do it, and I'm pretty new to Swift, so I'm actually still learning this stuff too. Um, but it's a bit unfortunate that there's nothing for Unity just yet. So basically, if you make something in Unity, here's one example of some tools that are becoming available. But if you make something in Unity, like using the Unity SDK, using the Unity software developer kits, you actually cannot put that into the Vision OS Pro software headset just yet. That's not available yet.
Hmm.
So that's a bit unfortunate. That's a bit difficult to deal with in some ways too. So
Is Apple like committed to using that? I'm sure it's just not there yet. So are they trying to block it somehow?
that's a good question. I mean, they're losing a lot of talent and potential if they're not doing it that way. So
Yeah, I would expect them to. I haven't looked into it. It's just something that came up because I know they're. I I do a lot of things in that space, but not about VR stuff in the way that they try to steer people towards this or that. So I'm just curious. But yeah, if you find out about that, let me know. But I'm curious, and I'm glad that you're doing stuff with it too. Maybe.
yeah. So what exactly are you working on?
Oh, I mean, I generally work in like health tech.
Okay.
I a lot of the things that like connect to or don't connect to products, and how they transmit data is more my space, but um, not like VR at this time anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's look at this link that Hussein shared, and I'll just open it up. You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, Vershali said she can't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. It's funny when people log in and log out. There tends to be some particular issue with like almost the caching of certain speakers. I don't know what that is.
Maybe.
So maybe I have to log in and out again, Rashali. Sorry, or Bradley coming in and out, but it'd probably be easier for Rashali to try.
Yeah. So this is the developer tools to create spatial experiences for Apple Vision Pro now available. So they have the Vision OS SDK, which is the software development kit. So the idea, this is, I guess, the headset, like a prototype. They don't have it available yet, so they're in this situation where they want people to buy a headset, maybe enterprise purchases, maybe individual purchases, but if they don't have content, it's going to be difficult to have any use for it. You can put like things from iOS into the headset, but that's kind of not that great. So they want to, when they release it formally, when they start selling versions of it, or when they start selling, the actual production version, they want to have some applications to go along with it. So that's my understanding of why they're doing this before the headset comes out. And you can develop things without the headset. It's just a matter of seeing it in 3D, or it is kind of hard to do without being in the headset. But at the same time, you can develop things if they give you the right environment. You can develop things, and you can get a sense of if it'll work or not. So that's the idea. And this has been a thing about VR more generally, is that how do you get content into the headset? Even if you release it, it'll take a while for people to develop things, and then people are sitting around waiting for it. But if you develop apps before the thing comes out, then it's a little bit, it justifies the cost a little bit more, but still, you do have this issue of like people coming up with things, and largely with the SDK, you can experiment to see what works. So this is pretty cool. This is like what it looks like if you put your headset on. So you have this menu, and it's kind of like, if you do this with MetaQuest, the MetaQuest 2, if you turn the pass-through on, you can have this menu pop up and then the room around you. But the MetaQuest 2 pass-through camera is not very good. Apparently the MetaQuest 3 pass-through camera is a lot better. And, there's, of course, Magic Leap, where you can do something like this as well, where you have the menu and it's kind of like up, projected up into the room. So you have this menu, you can play with things. And so this is basically what they're doing. As I understand it, the Vision Pro OS is like based on iOS. So it already has sort of a basis in, pretty solid development. So, it's not like they're starting from scratch on the operating system. They have a pretty decent thing. So this is a heart in VR, or in AR, I should say. And it's kind of beating in the middle of the room. That's nice. And you can take it apart, which is always a good thing about AR. I've seen these kind of applications where you have anatomical objects and you can pull them apart. And that's kind of the idea about basic anatomical education, is that you can pull apart the heart and see the different parts of it rotated around and see what's inside. And this is a DJ with a set of turntables, so you can manipulate things. I guess this is something someone developed here, but I'm not sure. Sometimes they, yeah. So I don't know if you Hussein, have you worked a lot with the SDK yet, or are you still getting your head around it?
I mean, I've worked with more or less what I can, based on what's been available so far, which is literally just like a month of its availability, at least for me. Right. So I mean, I did share some experience I had at the hackathon last month, where we got together the Vision OS Pro. We got together and developed apps for the Vision OS Pro, and we were able to also develop like these sort of menus and interfaces for people to interact with things in the room in front of them. So yeah.
That's great. So that's for Vision OS, or was that just more general development, like you were just?
That's for Vision OS, Pro.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed that event. You were talking about it, so that's great. And yeah, I think it's like that's really the thing is they're trying to get people to develop solid applications, and because if you can't do that, then it's kind of you release something with no content. That's not, people aren't going to buy that, especially at that level of expense. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad to see. I don't know what they're, there are all sorts of unique user interaction issues that come up. Looks like they've done some pretty interesting things with like volumetric displays and things like that. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do with it and what happens there in that space. So anything else you'd like to add, Hussein, or?
No, I think that's basically it. Yeah, one thing I'll just mention is that excuse me, I think that there's definitely a lot of potential for this, especially from scientific and research points of view, and what science may be able to do and stuff like that. But it's just there's still a lot of limiting things, like not just the Unity SDK not being available, but just trying to understand in what direction Apple would like to go with this, with response to their current competition too, like with Meta, for example. Yeah, because Meta's been developing their own headsets and things like that too. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something.
I mean, sorry, what?
It's something that's going to be a challenge. Is like having these different platforms. I mean, it may end up being like, if you have a PC version and a Mac version of software now.
Yeah, like that. I think that's a really big point. Is like we have, oh, is it on Apple or Android? But
Right.
now it's almost it. I would see it being. I don't know. I'm not really an engineer or a developer in this space, but I I feel like there's a lot of in a strategic and technology development and sort of like what's that called, substrate development space, if you will. Like there has to be so much battling right now between Apple wanting to make their stuff really selective versus, oh, we can do cross-platforming kind of stuff. Because I imagine like the people on different sides of that debate internally and externally, that's a really fascinating space to watch. And I know I'm kind of maybe dipping outside of the zone of this meeting. Well, maybe not. It's the open source part of it.
Yeah.
But like the pressure and the desire to build a product a certain way, and especially if Apple's going to kind of try to be its, oh, we're the user interface friendly, and they're kind of motifs about stuff. But building out a hardware, software, something that's so intensely embedded and so intensely like unique to itself, I think that's a really challenging point, because I really wonder like what kind of research and scouting they're trying to do to sort that out. Like how much, do we want to be this sort of space that is more open versus the different things that can be done to push people away from it. And I think it's like a major bottleneck, both in like getting people on board and developing things and just like the hand wringing strategically. Because, and I say this just for a little more context, I say this because nobody's going to really stop them. Like there's nothing on the other side of it. There's no ombudsman of virtual reality management or like hardware development either. And as in, it's literally Apple and Facebook and Meta who kind of are building and aware of certain technologies. And I'm not saying that in like conspiracy tech stuff way. More just like they are arguing with themselves and then a couple other groups about trying to determine what what can happen and what should happen and how it will happen. So I think it's a really fascinating space. I won't go there too much longer.
Yeah.
I'll just mention quickly. I did a little bit of search. I was trying to find something else. I know we all know. I think everybody here knows very well. Facebook and Meta. I like to call it Facebook because I like disappointing tech overlords in their naming strategies. Like I'm never going to call it Z as opposed to Twitter. Get over it. Facebook has been in their Quest series and a bunch of stuff for a long time, and Quest 3 is supposed to be more work oriented, and all these different other projects they're doing. I was trying to find something else specifically, but I can't find it. But what I did find is that apparently um, Unity is opening a beta version of its platform for Vision OS, but it's not. I don't really know how available it is. But I guess to answer my question earlier, Unity and is supposed to be they're working towards it. But I imagine part of the reason why it's a slow process is a little bit of the grand strategy talk I mentioned earlier. But we'll see. I will definitely be looking into that for a variety of reasons. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Hussein, did you have something you wanted to say?
Also, hi Morgan. And Rachel is gone.
So Jesse, why are you just Jay right now?
I mean, I'm as this is one of my many different devices.
It sounds like professors, they don't sign their name; they put initials, right? That's when you know you're special, right? You're like I used to put Shaw like SHA instead of putting my name in emails. It made me feel so powerful when I did that. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So so spatial computing between whether you're going for what Apple's doing, what Meta's doing with their spatial computing headset, and what's available and what's practical, and what potential there is for scientific and research. Because by the way, I spoke to Bradley, and I think I spoke to a few others about this. I did apply to Apple as well as a research scientific software engineer position. To be able to develop things like that for them because they're looking for scientists, they're looking for researchers too. Whether this is going to really take off among academics, like scientists, professors, researchers doing their work, and how beneficial it's going to be for them, I can definitely see it taking off in much the same way like VR and AR have for research and further applications and purposes and things. Um, I do think maybe right now, at least from what I've seen so far, the biggest thing or one of the biggest bottlenecks is that there's just not so much available in terms of like what scientists and researchers want to do or what they need to do in those ways. So, it's just going to be interesting to see how things turn out. So,
Yeah. So yeah, about the grand strategy. So I mean, we know what Apple's done around the iPhone, like with their App Store, and it's been to stress design, like sound design principles. So if you submit an app to the App Store for iPhone, it has to have certain features, and they're very persnickety about what's in the APK file and everything, and so that's something that we know that like they have high standards for that. But also, you have if you go to the Meta Quest store right now, you'll see that they have a lot of apps, a lot of games, and but then you can also do things like sideload apps, and there's a separate thing that you can do to sideload things and download. There's another store that's like not run by Meta. It's not official, but you can put things on the headset, and so that's a much lower bar really for getting things into the store. So I mean the really the barrier is like if I create an application, is it the official sort of in the official store or is it in the side store? Does it work well? Sometimes things that are even official apps that go through the regular store are not always very functional, and so that's an issue too. And I think that's true with like mobile devices in general. But I'd be interested to see. I imagine that the Vision Pro strategy will be to have like this sort of like mobile app store concept. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see how this all plays out. And for science, like a lot of the stuff that we have now for like MetaQuest is gaming related. There's stuff with respect to basic productivity apps and things like that. But for actual science, there isn't a lot. There's some things people have been doing around, and this has been true for a long time, around like molecular modeling, where you put three-dimensional molecules in front of someone and they can play with it. They can, look at the binding sites and look at the different parts, and things like that. Of course, there's anatomy. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. Hussein just posted this thing on.
yep,
Let me share.
Apple's Vision OS Pro. brain chip interface. So not brain computer interface, brain chip interface, BCI.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the way forward. But the Apple Vision OS Pro headset is going to be able to provide computing power, and it is non-invasive. Like it's not they're not directly implanting a chip under the skull or anything like that. But to be able to test and be able to see whether someone using their headset is able to apply themselves with their brain activity and their. I believe these sorts of technologies, like these sort of brain chip interfaces, detect things like the way you speak. Excuse me. The way you move your head, the way you move your eyes, the way you can control concentration and focus and attention and memory, and seeing so there's potential for those things like that. So
Yeah, I know that like Jesse, you have that headset that like I don't know what it is if it's like a EEG or FNIR type sensor.
And the other one.
Yeah. So that's kind of I know that like the Vision Pro has this high end way to like detect eye movements, and a lot of headsets are incorporating that where they're putting in
sort
eye
of the
movements.
next wave of like cool, like that will be part of it too. And sorry, I think I interrupted your point. Were you going towards like moving towards like brain chips and brain like,
yeah.
Is that what you're saying, Bradley, or also today?
That's what I was like. That's what I was wanting to bring up. At least in terms of what I'm interested into, in some ways, what you can do with spatial computing that's not simply just like seeing your wardrobe in your computer in your house in front of you, but what can scientists do? What can researchers do? How can we use this to transform lives and change the lives of people around you? So there it is. And yeah, it's let's say. You can say they're kind of following suit with Neuralink, but it's in a different manner. Like it's not with Musk's mission.
Right.
It's if you'd want to work for Elon, like that's
yeah.
in my lab back at the University of Toronto, we joked about it all the time. We're like, great. So when are you going to apply to Neuralink? Like, and I don't think any of us were too keen with working for Elon. So disrespectfully,
I was at one point about it.
Yeah. Okay. If that's your belief, I respect that. I'm not trying to put you down for whatever you choose to believe. But,
key phrases at one point in my life. Anyway, yeah, that's cool. That's very cool stuff. And I don't know if you've been in any of the meetings where I've talked about like I find it fun to reference like the brain dance technology and the cyberpunk universe of Cyberpunk 2077, and I feel like all of these things are sort of relative to how do we get closer towards that like magical technology that can record like everything and share the cognitive space and then also record like this. I think it's so funny to talk about and so cool to think about, like recording sort of this like 5-foot high definition and like 15-foot low definition space around your body, like audio, visual, everything. Like that's like impossible. But it's so fun to kind of juxtapose these conversations towards that aim. Because right now, in 2023, we are like, well, can we move past the wardrobe and the closet and picking out what displays on your imaginary desktop? Like that's where we are, and I feel like that's such a I think actually like this is a I'm glad that I'm glad between obviously I think Morgan's still here, like Morgan's neurotech stuff and then you doing it in this space. Like I'm actually really happy that we get to have these conversations in the lab because
absolutely, it's really great. So I'm very very glad to be here. So by the way, I'm still working for the startup, for the VR startup. And things are going well. We received funding, so things are taking off, and that basically guarantees I can get paid. That's the important thing. Yeah, because for startup culture, they promise stocks, and if they get funding, they'll be able to pay you. So they've received funding, and it's all good.
Okay.
That's great.
That's great.
And I'm actually still applying to jobs because I can do this startup gig part time, and there are many people who are working on this startup part time too. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's great.
I guess what I'm just glad about, and on a more like personal level, is that they were trustworthy, honest people. Like they weren't trying to. I don't know. There was nothing. Wasn't like some sort of fraud or scam or like
Yeah,
it was nothing like that. Which I know it sounds like I'm almost talking crazy talk, but you do have to be careful when startup approaches you. You know, you have to be careful. Yeah.
And then let that like I won't go into soapbox here, but like for the people watching, like Rashali and Raj and anybody else who happens to watch this, like that's not to me. That's 100% like especially about tech, like tech startups and the AI startups. Like there's a lot of basically scams, like outright scams, but also just like
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who will advertise opportunity to do things and then try to get a very specific thing from you, or a lot of times it'll be, hey, why don't you work on this project to show us that you can do this? And they're basically just going to try to get free labor from you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Or get some access or prestige that you have and use it, and then just like oh well, sorry, it didn't work out. Bye. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's because people are nefarious, and sometimes it's because the startups. And this kind of was something I was a part of in different ways. I didn't ever talk about this part of it much, and I'll be kind of vague about it. But like, there were some things I was involved with that were basically people just didn't know what they were doing, and unintentionally they became really. They weren't nefarious, but they were unintentionally just making promises they couldn't really keep. And I was like, so you have to be careful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, do your due diligence, ask around, get a feel or vibe of what it's like, and but you know we've got funding and it's all good now. So
Always check when your stock options vest.
yeah.
if only I could go back in time 10 years ago and invest in Bitcoin, and I'd be, you know, no, no. Um, anyways, no, yeah, and once again, this also depends on like you know my ability to put effort into. So we're all working together. We're all just working hard here. So yeah, thank you. That's all I wanted to share.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, so a little bit about the article that we were talking about. This is something. There are applications like eye gaze based biofeedback, and there are other types of things where you're using cues from the person's body, or you can measure brain state through like some surface sensor, where you can get a sense of the state of the user. So if they're looking at something, like if they're looking at something they're intending to move towards, or if they're interested in something in the environment, or if they're excited, or if they're angry, those things can be sensed, and then the interface can use that information to improve the experience. So that's what this is all about. So that's another way of doing brain computer interfaces. It's not invasive, but it does give that information. So that's a great thing to look forward to in the future. See where that goes. People have been trying to work on that for like 2 decades maybe now, but they've been really kind of, it's been kind of a hard thing to do, because you have to have sensors that are really not just sensitive, or don't have some sort of spatial scale. So for example, if I put a sensor on your forehead, I want to maybe record some activity in the frontal lobe of your brain. If I put it here, it might, my muscle movements might interfere, motion of my head might interfere with that sensor. So it needs to be like very sensitive. You need to have, machine learning algorithms that can like isolate out the neural signal from other artifacts. And then, you want to be able to have them work together, so you can put them in different locations on the head or on the body, and then get a state out of that. So
You guys haven't seen the Twitch streamer who plays. I think she's playing Counter Strike just completely by her brain alone.
oh
I don't
wow.
know, some first person shooter game. Yeah, like using the EEG. I mean, okay, so it's not her brain alone. Oh, she's playing Elden Ring. Excuse me.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, that's a tough one. I thought it was just like something a bit simpler like Minecraft, but like Elden Ring. There we go. No, so she uses it tracks her head movements and her eye movements, so she can move the player with her head and move the view with her eyes. and then using her brain activity, using the EEG, that's all the button controls and everything, like
Right.
for shooting or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that as well. You can map like a brain state to a movement, or you can have like just a motion controller where you just move your forehead and you say I'm going to move this way, and it moves left or right. So that's cool. It's nice to see demos like that because it's just like yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, so it's not completely from the brain. She is moving her head and moving her eyes too. So it's not complete mind control. Just
Right.
Yeah.
And this is like we need to focus on the other updates and stuff.
Yeah,
But last
yeah.
thing I'll say is this is super interesting regarding stuff that we talked about in the condition futures group recently in terms of like microphenomenology
Oh, right.
and being able to sort of record some of that stuff potentially. So let's definitely come back to that. I posted the link in the Slack so we can look at it later. But yeah, I know it's already been half an hour, so
Yeah.
I thought Raj, you were going to say something, or Vishali too. I saw some others in the chat, but
yeah. Let me do Vishali. I think Vishali. I don't know if she can talk, but I have like her update in here. So Vishali gave an update in the chat. She said I'll start working by 14th of September because exams are going on. Plus, I don't know what's wrong with my devices. That was when she was having the trouble hearing. So okay, yeah, you're gonna start. Yeah, you're in the middle of exams. Okay, thank you. That was a good update. Now, Raj.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, so my screen is.
Yeah, you can see it.
So I modified the documentation as per our previous discussions. I added a video of the previous model of Himanshu's along with the limitations that it has, such as it uses the n logo language, which is a bit restrictive and not very developer friendly, and the Q learning, the training session is not saved, so it expires when you basically stop running the model, and then it will feeding it data and parameters from GitHub and all those platforms would be more easier in Python. I don't think it would be possible in any logo and the other points as well. And then I updated this section and then added the methods. Like I hadn't added Ankit's name, so I updated that one. Apart from that, this is the instructions part of how you clone the repo and basically installing all the dependencies for the website, creation of your virtual environment to get the Mesa models up and running. So what I was thinking before this section is actually I was planning on making a Python script. So what the user will, let's say a new person wants to work on this project, all he would have to do is clone the repository and run a Python script. So that would run all these commands automatically for setting up the repository. So all you would have to do is git clone and then run a Python script. I have made such scripts before, so I think if I can modify some of my old scripts, that should be good to go. So that is there. Apart from that, this is the model from last year. So what I noticed in this is in Mesa, basically there is a grid environment, but this, as we can see, this is not really a very grid environment. Like people are parameter free space, and then you have these issues and different complexity levels, the Earth shot, Moon shot, and the Mars Jupiter shot. So I checked into Mesa's documentation of how this can be implemented. So basically, there are three sorts of grids. One is the single grid. So on one particular cell, only one agent is there. And multi-grid is where one cell can contain a set of agents. So I think this would be the one that we would need to implement so that we can kind of try and replicate the free space thing, because I don't think that mapping the open source sustainability to a one agent per grid would be a very good option. And so, as I discussed previously, what I was thinking is if we have a grid, so on particular coordinates, like let's say on coordinate 4,5, there is a let's say Earth shot issue. So if there is a new contributor, so he would probably try to work on the Earth shot issues. For a new contributor, the Q learning can try and somewhat feed him to the Earth shot issues grid. So for that, there are like things like we can place agents. place agent on a particular coordinate. So I was thinking if there is a new contributor, his location, like his initial location, can be a bit like it can be with it can be in close proximity to a one-shot issue or a beginner level issue. And if a contributor like loses health, as Ankit told that we can try to gamify it, where every contributor has some health, then we can just remove that agent from the environment. So, like we can maybe consider that he's no longer a contributor. And then there are like these functions for get neighborhood. So what this would do is if let's say you are in cell 4,5, so this will give you like all your neighborhoods like above cell above you and to the left and right. So I think that would be also good to have. Although the movement will have to be controlled by the queue learning algorithm. So I still have to look for a way to do that. I have tried some basic ways, but it's not really working. So I'll try to just map the queue. This week I'll try to integrate the queue learning as well as MISA modeling environment together. I think I should be able to do this week.
Okay, yeah, that looks great. So yeah, last Saturday you gave a very nice overview of the Q learning aspect of this, which I think is pretty good. And now you're moving the model into MISA, which of course has a different setup than that logo. And I noticed that yeah, you have a lot more options for setting up the environment. So yeah, the different grids, and then there's a continuous version. But sticking to the grid would be probably the best solution because you have individual contributors, and then you have the neighborhood types. So that almost kind of moves us into like sort of a cellular automata world where you have these different neighborhoods where they're updating, but that's not something we need to really worry about right now. I think yeah, getting the mapping the Q learning to the grid and the tasks is the main thing. Um, and yeah, so I mean, a new contributor would start at an Earthshot and then learn to move to the more complex tasks. And then if they fail, then you remove an agent, or otherwise you reward the agent. Yeah, I think that's good. That would be a good way to model it. And yeah, I like the documentation that you've been making, so I think that's good. Having it in a gist is probably going to be good for the submission because, yeah, so that's the gist, link to the gist. It's a nice way to, kind of package it. Any other comments about that?
I'll try to first. I'll try to recreate the basic net logo model in MISA because I think the main challenge would be integrating Q learning into MISA. Once that is done, extending the model should be pretty easy. So I think the most tricky part would be the integration part itself. So I'll try to get this.
Right. And is there like a is it like how would this run like on the web if we were going to implement this in the website or on a website? Is this pretty easy?
It would. Yeah, it should be like there is a site called Cloudflare Tunnels which helps you deploy these models. And I already found a way a few weeks back on how to get the MISA models deployed and have them integrated in the website. So that should not be an issue.
Okay. I don't know if Jesse had anything to say. I think he had his mic unmuted.
Not really. Just saying yes. I'm glad for the update, and I don't know if I'll be able to. I'm trying to share the board, the project board, and GitHub to kind of update something. I'm having some login issues, but it's nice to see the Q learning moving forward. And what is the extension for? Basically a month, or how? When is this period closed? I know some of the other things closed for like the regular stuff, but I know we're extended.
We're extended till October 23, I believe. So
okay, that's a little over a month.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can. I'd be curious. They don't do it right now. I think maybe for next time on the Slack, just sort of like. And this is mostly for me because I don't really know, and I missed it. This is actually all on me because I missed the last meeting or two or three. But just kind of getting a sense of what we want to try to aim for to get kind of where's the finish line, and how do we make sure we get to sort of that version of it. I'll try to help with that.
Yeah, so I think the finish line is just finding a stopping point. So I think, we can keep working until we get to a stopping point, or rather, I think we should kind of figure out what the stopping point is.
Right.
So I think Raj is pretty close to the stopping point for GSoC. I think once in Mesa, having something in Mesa that's implementable, you don't need to refine it to the nth degree to submit it. It's just,
Right.
getting it to a working model, something that works, and then we can have the documentation, and then that's a good endpoint, and then that's something that we can build upon later. Like what we did last year was we built a model in NetLogo, and that was kind of something we could show off, but it wasn't like a refined product. This is more following up on that and making it better. So this is like something it'll take a while to get it like where people will be using it, and it'll look really sophisticated. So and in terms of like that stopping point, that's we'll talk about that more, what exactly it needs to be. But I think just as long as you have something that works, and in Vrishali's case, we'll talk more about like what that stopping point will look like. And yeah, I think though for Google Summer of Code, it's always pretty broad in terms of what the stopping point is. A lot of times it's like if you've completed the project, but completing the project is like hitting all your milestones in your yeah.
Absolutely. Excuse me. I think it's a better way to say what I was trying to get is like the stopping point, just because the better, wrapping it up and making sure that it's getting it in the right sort of finished package and having the documentation and all that stuff, and then just doing that. There's plenty of time.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm helping with that how I can, and it sounds like things are going the way they should, so that's great.
Yeah. I know it's hard to know what the stopping point is on projects sometimes. Like, and this holds true for research. Like we have these packages of like artifacts. Like we'll make a presentation or a talk or something, or a paper, and then like where does that end there, or do we continue on, or because a project is more than like just a paper or a presentation. It's usually something that's continuous. You're always learning, but at the same time you want to have like something at some point to show that you've kind of like in that case it's more of a milestone. So if I have my milestone of like I want to get out a paper and I want it to have like certain analyses in it, or I want to develop a model a little bit for that, that's good, but the model can always be refined. So it might lead to another paper, and then determining what the paper actually is, what the unit of publication or the unit of getting things out the door is always like a challenge, because sometimes you're not doing enough work, sometimes you're doing too much work for one publication or talk, so it's always hard to know exactly what that looks like.
Yeah, I think for specifically this project, it took many turns in its way. Like initially, when I joined the organization, it was NetLogo was the prescribed language for models, but then we switched Mesa, and then after switching to Mesa, like I think around after 1.5 months being in the project, we started thinking about incorporating reinforcement learning into the project, which would maybe enhance it, and then I had these discussions with Ankit and then Himanshu about what model does and all that. And then after that, I looked into this OpenAI gym and all. So I think, it has, the project has had many turning points in its entire duration. So the and the end goal is kind of tricky to say, but I think I can recreate the pre-existing NetLogo environments and like package it into a final deployed website or a product, something like that. So that can be good to present at the end of this month.
Yeah, that would be great. And yeah, I did see the conversation with Ankit. So he's pretty happy with how it's gone, like how it turned out when he was, we were going over some of these things that we wanted to do, or his suggestions, and so I think that he's okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had some discussions with him. So he had described to me some issues that he felt are there in the project and some blockers that might be there. So that pretty much got resolved last week after I explained to like after I like when you saw last week's presentation, most of the blockers were dealt with over there. So he was pretty happy about that. He said that the progress is quite good, and I think only the Visa integration part is remaining, and that should be doable as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thanks for the update. Yeah, that's great. Great work. All right. So I guess that's Raja's gist link. So I guess I'll finish up, and I have some things on some pre. Well, I've been thinking about open source and like how we have this sort of an AI. Everything is kind of coming out and changing things, and there's been this sort of existential worry about AI becoming more closed source. And so I have some things to say about that, at least in presentation form. So there's one thing I found on X or Twitter or whatever it is. This is Jeremy Howard, has done a lot of stuff with AI, and he says, I chat to AI geniuses every day. Most of them can't get a job at a big tech company because they're too young, too old, too foreign, too uneducated, and are too weird. Open sources win, big tech's loss. Now, that's not entirely true. It's not really a zero-sum game, but as we'll see, there's been a trend towards closing up some of the AI sphere. And, that can happen because we want to maybe make it less sort of open to nefarious uses, or we want to control, kind of regulate how it's used. But at the same time, we're closing off opportunities for people like this to participate in AI and create things. So this is, maybe a downside to some of the sort of development trajectory of AI. So this is an article that came out in Wired. This is on the myth of open source AI. And so there's this idea that, if we just open source our AI platform, it'll be something we can use to foster innovation, to engage people who wouldn't otherwise be able to work with these technologies because they don't work for a big tech company, or they don't have access to, they can't afford to buy a product and use it or whatever. So there are a lot of open source tools in the AI sphere. It's not that we don't have any or that they're all going away tomorrow. It's just that some of them, open sourcing something like Llama 2 enables a lot of forks, a lot of different versions of it that, can do different things. So, they're large language models that are, trained on many billions of parameters, but you can take those models and you can specialize them towards different domains. So we talked actually Jesse, we're talking about this We Robot poster on, the frontier maps and large language models. We were also talking about large language models for specific research purposes, where you train it on papers in your area and you can ask it questions about the research area and get answers. Now that requires that model to be open source, that it's not restricted in its use, or at least not restricted to in terms of customization too much. So this is an analysis that someone did. It shows that open source AI tools like Llama 2 are still controlled by big tech companies in a number of ways. So this isn't just about like closing things versus opening things. It's maybe like providing an open source license that is not, maybe isn't as enabling as we think it is. So, they talk about ChatGPT, which made it possible for anyone to play with powerful AI, but the inner workings of the world-famous chatbot remain a closely guarded secret. So you can play with the code, you can make things happen, you can give it prompts and it'll give you answers, but there are certain parts of it that are closed, so people can't necessarily, play with the architecture maybe the way they would like. In recent months, however, efforts to make AI more open seems to have gained momentum. In May, someone leaked a model from Meta called Llama, which gave outsiders access to its underlying code as well as the weights. Then in July, Meta chose to make an even more powerful model called Llama 2, available for anyone to download, modify, and reuse. So it's definitely in that open source spirit. Meta's models have since become extremely popular, but there are certain aspects that we need to think about how to open source these models so that they're not abused, or not intellectual property is protected, but also that people can use them the way they want. It might seem as if the open source approach, which has democratized access to software, ensured transparency, and improved security for decades, is now poised to have a similar impact on AI. And so this group said that that's not really always true. This is a research paper that examined the reality of these models as open. The models that are branded with open may come with some catches. So, for example, Llama 2 is free to download, modify, and deploy, but is not covered by a conventional open source license. Meta's license prohibits using Llama 2 to train on other language models, and it requires a special license if a developer deploys it in an app or service with more than 700 million daily users. So this could be, a hurdle as people scale up their applications. If you have a small enterprise and you run it with one of these models and then it becomes really popular, then you run into problems with some of these issues. And so I've been, in my project management course, we've been talking about some of these issues actually more directly. When you have an open source license and you have this kind of disruptive technology, which is always changing, and it's something that we can't get our arms around. So there are always opportunities to scale up or to change things. You can't really anticipate the needs of your project in a year or 6 months. And so there's people are still struggling with this. So models that are released under a normal open source license, like GPT Neo from the nonprofit Eleuther AI, are more fully open. But it is difficult for such projects to get on an equal footing. So, there are a lot of things about, data sets being available or being kept secret, software frameworks being controlled by large corporations. So, they're referring to TensorFlow and PyTorch that are maintained by large corporations. So it's hard to really modify those languages. You take what they give you and you can use it that way. The amount of computer power, of course, is also a limiting factor. So if you're a small group, you can't really get the computer power that other groups can have. So, first of all, this space is sort of the way the technology is deployed is inherently sort of unequal. But then you have these open source licenses, which may or may not cover the things you need to use these models in a way that's fully open. So I think that's the lesson here. In my project management course, I did a few slides on this a couple weeks ago, actually, where we talked about new technologies and open source projects, and especially these disruptive technologies. And so we know that, for example, when ChatGPT came out last year, that it became a very disruptive force. And, it forced a lot of traditional institutions to come up with rules to deal with their impact. So, Stack Overflow had a temporary policy to ban contributions by ChatGPT. But I don't know if that temporary policy is still in place even. It may be that they've updated their policy, their stance towards it. And this is largely, it happens with a lot of disruptive technologies. It happened with um, you know, plagiarism, where you get access to things that you can easily lift text out of, and we needed to have a whole suite of plagiarism checkers and things like that. So, there are all sorts of things that always pop up and can be used in different ways, and we have to respond to them. We can't be, reactionary about it, but we also have to struggle to deal with those things. When you're dealing with something like stable diffusion, you have a lot of forks, and people want to use it for their own purposes. So having a good open source license for that is important. The problem is a lot of the open source licenses that existed when generative AI was coming about were not really suitable for generative AI. So we need to develop new types of licenses like Creative ML and OpenRailM. But even those licenses, if we, as this technology develops, they may become out of date. And so it's really dealing with a lot of the training data, a lot of generating things. If you generate something that looks like a work of art, is it copying it or not? And, a lot of times people don't necessarily understand what's underneath the hood, so they can't answer that question. And so there are a lot of forks for some of these enterprises, and those forks may become their own big projects, where they might lead to technical advances. But the question is do the licenses enable that, and does the access to the code enable that as well? Because, as I said, a lot of some corporations will keep their code very closed and other aspects of the project open, and then call it open source. And so you can fork a project, but you can only use it in a certain way. So that may be, something that as we get more into these kind of technologies will change. There's this paper from the archive from this year where they talk about generative AI systems and sort of this spectrum of being closed or open. So there's some models that are fully closed, and these are from like Google, DeepMind, and Meta, and then some other models from OpenAI that are more open, and then some other models that are fully open from Big Science and Eleuther AI, and one from Meta and Crayon. So, you have organizations that are fully open with their models, some that are sort of semi-open, and some that are fully closed. And this is, this state of affairs will probably persist in some way. It's just worth noting, that there's some models that aren't open. There's some models that are open and they advertise that they're open. And, you really have to pay attention to the details. And so this is this paper I just talked about, the myth of open source AI. And I think, really the lesson here is that, when we have open source tools, when we have new technologies that are disruptive and come about, there are a lot of interesting ethical challenges, but there are also these practical challenges of how do we make use of them, and our conception of how we make these things open, are they really serving people well who might otherwise not use them, or may be able to take advantage of what they have to offer. Okay, so Morgan and Jesse had some comments here. So Morgan said both the fast AI people have good things to say about the state of the world. So that's good. And then Jesse said we should talk to Zangief about being fully open. Okay.
That's a very niche joke. So okay. Most people won't get it.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
It's doing his special moves.
Oh.
Yes, sir. All right, muscle power is fully open. There we go. Great.
All right.
I just wanted to say one thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so all the points you discussed, basically open source AI has its ethical challenges, people misusing the source code and all that. But I think one more very important factor is that, let's say, if we consider the example of OpenAI, they made ChatGPT free. So basically, they are giving the public a preview of how their product is, because they need a way to sort of monetize it. So they have this is a preview of our product. If you like it, you can maybe pay some pay some money and then you can get the GPT-4, or you can get the GPT API and fine tune it to your own data set. So in that way, they are also enabling developers to like make their own products by fine tuning GPT to their own data set, but at the same time, they are maintaining their closed sourceness by just providing an API to do that instead of the entire source code itself. Because making these large language models, it requires a lot of engineering effort, research effort, and money, like basically the money to spend on the computation power, etc. So I think open sourcing it would like take a heavy toll on its monetization aspects. That may also be one of the reasons.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And to take I don't know, maybe a stretch to say to take that one step further. Maybe it's more like 10 steps further in a specific direction. But the thing is, like, hold on a second. That's right. The thing is, the hard part of like the ethics, the AI ethics and tech ethics part of it is that that's exactly right in terms of the physical. There's certain things that you can open to people using, but then there's the actual infrastructure and the nature of the organization itself, you know, that becomes the organization that's centering things. How do I say this? There's a very unique situation happening in this space right now, because as much as we talk about open source, when we get to really, really high-powered things like OpenAI, like I think we've talked about this here before, but Sam Altman's been on record saying we had to become for profit because we had to raise money in a way that could never be raised before, because it's so important we do this thing, get it out there, and expose it. And like that's great, but that also shows that there's sort of the open source software part of it, but there's this very difficult tension between people doing things at the real frontiers, far beyond what we can see as everyday people. Like that space is a challenging space to deal with, because the compute and the power and the resources are almost impossibly not open source, especially when you're trying to manage them in a specific way. So I mean, we're kind of getting into governance and organizational structure and much heavier, deeper things than this here. But like, I think it's important to kind of, you know, be aware that sort of boundary or influence is there on all of this, and that's the challenge. Because when you're making stuff and when you are building it, when you are someone building it, interfacing with it, you kind of have to make choices too, in sort of frontline situations about what you're doing with that, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's important. Really good discussion about this.
Yeah, and part of the thing about the licenses is, you know, what do you protect as intellectual property? What do you open source that isn't sensitive? Because these organizations do invest in a lot of that, and they want to make a profit off of the core thing, and so that's sort of the tension too, is how to do that.
Yeah, there are actually some other issues as well. I read a blog recently. I don't remember it entirely, but basically there is this tool called Terraform, which helps you maintain your code as an infrastructure. It's usually used by the DevOps engineers of an organization. So what happened recently is that there is a team from, I think, San Francisco who like copied the entire Terraform code base just using Copilot. So the problem with generative AI is, if let's say even if you use Copilot, so when you write some code, that code is consumed by the GitHub team, because they are taking your code and then trying to increase the training data set to make it more and more efficient. So by making use of these generative AI tools, you are also leaking your data. So in this case, what happened is, I think Terraform took a heavy loss because the other people, they just used Copilot and just copied the entire product of theirs and released it on some lower price tiers. So I think and Copilot is not even open source. So even not making the AI open source, it still has a lot of potential risks.
Yeah.
And and as our report, like I would love, actually I said this now, for topics like this, anything about like intellectual property, open source rights, access, and tech ethics, I would really encourage anybody in this group, and the lab too, but especially in this group specifically, I would look to just get get some questions or like really interesting topics, because I can either ask about them at We Robot, which would be a perfect place to do it, or um, they may just come up there and I can try to point, okay, they covered this here, because I feel like that would be really good, and we could turn it into sort of our open source team reviews, We Robot or something. That would be a really fun way to talk about all that. So
Yeah.
if you have ideas, please put them in the Slack, and I'll compile them. But I would really like to do that. Try to mention that next time too.
Yeah, please give a little bit more, flesh that idea a little bit more out in the Slack. I think it's a good idea. Well, yeah, we should do something like that.
Okay,
All right.
I'll put some in there now. But yeah, thanks everybody.
Well, thanks. Yeah, all right. That's all. No, good updates and good discussion. Talk to you next week.
Take care, everyone.
Take
Bye bye.
care. Bye.